Good morning and welcome to My Firehouse Kitchen. I'm firefighter chef Joseph Bonanno, and today we're here to talk about sharp knives and how to sharpen them properly. You may say to yourself, well, is it really important to have a sharp knife? Well, yes, it is. One reason is it's actually more dangerous to have a dull knife than it is to have a sharp knife, because as you're cutting, you have to press so hard, you stand a better chance of cutting yourself. So it's very important to have a very sharp knife in the kitchen. Now, when you're sharpening your knives, I want you to think about two things. There's sharpening, and you're going to use a stone, and there's honing, and you're going to use a steel. This is a diamond-coated or stone-coated sharpening steel. Now what you're going to do, and you'll see a lot of chefs do it, at a 20-degree angle, like this. I particularly think that's a little dangerous. Might be a little easier to kind of put it into the cutting board, and again at a 20-degree angle. And you can hear the stone actually grinding an edge, and what that's doing is beveling a 20-degree edge on your knife. And you don't have to do that every time, just when the knife is dull. Now you'll see a chef before each time he cooks using a steel. Now you can hear the difference. It's a steel, and all that's doing is removing some of the burrs off the edge of a knife. And again, that's the way you'll see some chefs do it. It's kind of tricky, and you can cut yourself. So I think it's a little safer to have it down towards the cutting board. Now, how do you know when the knife is really sharp? Well, you can slice on a piece of paper. You'll see some people plunk out a hair and kind of split a hair, but that's kind of a corny thing to do. But how I can tell whether the knife is really sharp is just lay it on here, grab it by the butt end, and just the weight of the knife itself, by drawing it across a tomato, should actually start to cut the tomato. So if you can't actually cut the tomato like that with the weight of the knife, that's actually a time to sharpen it on a stone. So sharpening, think stone. Honing, think steel. And as we say in the New York City Fire Department, it's time for me to take up. Good morning, I'm Joseph Bonanno of the New York City Fire Department, and welcome to My Firehouse Kitchen. Today we're going to talk a little bit about knife skills. Okay, two of the most important knives to have in your kitchen is a 7-inch chef's knife and a small paring knife, and a utility knife for any other odd cutting that you're going to do. You don't want to use these knives for that. Now, how you're going to hold the knife in particular, and a good knife, is going to be balanced when you hold it in the center there. You're going to have your two fingers here like this, and then grab the handle like this. It's not from the movie Psycho. You're not looking to kill somebody. People cut like this, or they ride their finger on the top of the knife to cut, and that makes it very wobbly when you're cutting. Important, too, to have a sharp knife so that you let the knife do the work. So you're going to hold it in the center so it's balanced, and you're going to grip it around the hand like this, and that stops any of this kind of wobbling like that. Now, for instance, if you're going to cut an onion and round things, what you would want to do is make sure that you put a flat edge on it first, or else, again, it's going to roll around the counter like that. So you want a nice flat edge on anything that's round, and that's how you start the process of cutting. So you have this nice flat edge like this. Now, a good sharp knife, again, you're holding like this, and you start like this, fingers curled under like that, riding along your knuckles, so you don't cut the fingertips. And you press nice and easy, and you don't have to press hard if you have a sharp knife. Straight through like that. Now, for example, an onion, again, a round onion, you want to have it nice and flat. And you would cut in like this, cut in like this, cut in like this, and not all the way through. You want to have the root end to hold the onion together, and then like that. And then there you go, a nice dice for a soup or a stock or something like that. Now again, right size knife for the right size job. A 7-inch chef's knife for a large Spanish onion like that. Now your smaller paring knife, again nice and sharp, is something you might want to use for a tomato. Let's say to cut that little stem out of a tomato like that. You wouldn't want to use the bigger knife. Again, very dangerous, kind of cutting like that. And that's the basics of knife skills. And as we say in the New York City Fire Department, it's time for me to take up. I'm Joseph Bonanno. Thank you. Good morning, I'm firefighter chef Joseph Bonanno of the New York City Fire Department, and welcome to My Firehouse Kitchen. Today we're going to talk about how to put together a healthy, balanced meal. Firefighting was a pretty tough business up in New York, so it was very important to get a well-balanced and filling and delicious meal together for the firefighters that I worked with. So what would constitute a really healthy, balanced meal for a firefighter or those of us with really hard jobs out there, and just about anybody looking to put together a healthy, balanced meal? Well, it's pretty simple, actually, breaking it up into carbohydrates. You got your complex carbohydrates. The reason they're called complex is because they're harder for your body to break down, and that's really what you want 60% or the bulk of your diet to be from complex carbohydrates. An example of those carbohydrates: white potatoes, sweet potatoes, rice, pasta, and breakfast type of meals would be a whole grain cereal or an oatmeal or a wheatina type of thing that if you were looking for a hot breakfast. So that's your complex carbohydrates. That's the bulk of your diet. The simplest sugars, okay, they're actually good for you, fruits and sugars and stuff like that, but they go in your system a little fast. So those kind of sugars you might want to reduce as a lesser part of your diet. And then, my favorite, protein. Firefighters are big, healthy, strapping guys, and I always had to make a really protein-based meal for them. So 1/3 of that meal should be protein. And what's your basic proteins? Your chicken, fish, red meat, pork, eggs, and some dairy products. The minor part of your meal, of course, and you've all heard it, is fats. Although some of them are good for you, like the oils and stuff like that. Very good for you, olive oil and butter. But that's really what you would want. Probably 1/3 of that plate of food that you're going to sit down to eat would be from the fat portion of the meal. So basically it would be 2/3 complex carbohydrate, maybe some simple sugars earlier in the day, a good amount of protein, which would be 1/3 of it, and a very small amount of fat. And that's kind of the way I balance my meals at the firehouses up in New York. And as we say in the New York City Fire Department, after that healthy meal, we go out to an alarm. It's time for me to take up. I'm Joseph Bonanno. Thank you. Good morning. I'm Joseph Bonanno, firefighter chef of the New York City Fire Department, and welcome to my firehouse kitchen. This morning, we're going to talk about the difference between a marinade and a sauce. One of the big mistakes I've seen firefighters and cooking people make is that they use a sauce instead of a marinade. Now, grilling is one of my expert areas, so much so that I actually had the Firehouse Grilling cookbook published. And the firefighters I used to work with, we used to take the apparatus out to the food store. We'd get ribs or chicken or some type of a meat, and they would always just go to the barbecue sauce section, grab a big container of barbecue sauce, bring it back to the firehouse, when I wasn't cooking anyway, and get a big lasagna pan. They put all the meat in the lasagna pan, and they take this hickory smoked onion bits, for example, pour the barbecue sauce, now notice I said sauce, all over the meat, and then in 15 minutes to a half an hour, they'd take the meat out to the grill, put it on the grill, and it would always come back jet black. And the reason for that is the difference between a sauce and a marinade. Now, a marinade is something you put on before you cook. You might want to poke it with a fork first to let the marinade get in, break down some of the protein fibers. And what a marinade does, it's not a sugar base. It's usually a vinegar base or a citrus base. It softens the protein, and then you do this before you cook, take it out to the grill, put it on the grill, comes out perfect. Now, a sauce, on the other hand, is not something that's softening the meat. What it's for, it's an actually molasses-based, sugar-based, or some type of a brown sugar base, and what that does is actually melts some of the sugar, and it coats the outside of the meat when the meat is done already. I've actually taken it off the grill already, and sometimes even put it back in the lasagna pan, and then put the sauce over it and cover it with foil and let the natural heat of the meat that's already cooked kind of melt all over that. And that's actually the ideal way to do it. Marinade before, sauce after. As we say in the New York City Fire Department, it's time for me to take up. That's what you need to know about sauces. I'm Joseph Bonanno. Thank you very much. Good morning. I'm Joseph Bonanno, firefighter chef of the New York City Fire Department, and welcome to my firehouse kitchen. You know what was one of the nicest things about being a New York City firefighter? Running into burning buildings? Nah. The cool uniform? Nah. Actually, sitting around the table, cooking, preparing a really great meal, and sitting and eating with all my firefighters that I worked with. So I want to give you a little lesson here on how to outfit a basic home or firehouse kitchen with the bare essentials. And with these bare essentials, you could put together probably one of the best meals you could possibly can. There's no need to go overboard on some of the stuff, just some of the basics that you might need in a home or firehouse kitchen. All right, let's start with measuring cups, okay? A basic set from 1 cup down to a 1/4 cup, like this. Hopefully nested together so you don't wind up losing them. And a larger measuring cup if you're going to do any kind of baking or something like that. Now, in saute pans, you want a nice small one for maybe doing some onions or some garlic, a medium-sized one, and I like, if you're going to have a third one, a non-stick pan for making nice omelets or something in the morning. And that's your basic set of saute pans that you might want to have. In the pot department, you'd probably want to have a small one and a large one for sauces and stocks and things you might be making around the firehouse kitchen. A cup, 2 to 3 nice nice big bowls for mixing anything you're doing with baking or any kind of salsas or mixes that you might be making or salads. A good roasting pan with a rack to keep the meat above and let some of the fat drain off into the bottom. So that's what you might need. And in basic kitchen tools, which would be a regular peeler, a small paring knife, and a professional one, a really good one. Don't be cheap on your knives. A 7-inch chef's knife, and I like to use a cheap knife that you use for utility kind of cutting that you might not want to ruin your better knives with. Local cheap cutting that you might want to do, and a good sharpening steel to put a nice little honed edge on the edge of your knife before you do any cutting, and a really good cutting board, maybe even 2 or 3 cutting boards. Wood or plastic is fine. And this is what you might need in a basic home or firehouse kitchen. And as we say in the New York City Fire Department, it's time for me to take up. I'm Joseph Bonanno. Thank you very much. Good morning. I'm Firefighter Chef Joseph Bonanno of the New York City Fire Department, and welcome to my firehouse kitchen. Today we're going to talk about herbs, the type of herbs to use, fresh versus dried, in any of the recipes that you might be making at home. Now, here you can see, of course, we have fresh herbs, nice and green, grown in a nice garden. And I've just used a sampling here, so we have some thyme, some parsley, some rosemary, and some fresh oregano. Now you can see these are all grown in a garden, nice and green. Now these are the same versions of these herbs that are dried. Oregano, rosemary leaves dried, thyme leaves dried, and parsley. Now you may say to yourself, you're making a recipe at home, like I did in the firehouse, and you say, well, is it easier or better to use fresh versus dried? In the firehouse up in New York, not all the time could we run out and get fresh herbs, so we had a really great supply in our staple locker of dried herbs, and the firefighters would always ask me, fresh versus dried, what's better? Well, there's actually timing involved when you're putting in the herbs. I prefer fresh when you can get them, but if you can't, dried are just as good. But the key thing to remember when you're using herbs in cooking is that fresh herbs, chopped, go in at the end of the dish, the last 5 to 10 minutes, so that they can keep all that flavor. Dried herbs, because they're dried, go in at the beginning of the dish. So if you're making yourself a nice pasta sauce and you're going to put in parsley or basil, that kind of is going to go in at the end of the dish if it's fresh, to keep it nice and fresh and keep all that flavorful oils that are in the leaves in the dish. Any of the dried herbs go in at the tail end of the at the very, very beginning of the dish. You can actually refresh these in hot water and drain them also, but they're still going to go in at the earlier part. So think dried in the beginning, fresh at the end. Fresh when you can, though, is always better. We always didn't have that option as a firefighter. So as I say in the New York City Fire Department, it's time for me to take up. I'm Joseph Bonanno. Thank you very much. Good morning. I'm Joseph Bonanno of the New York City Fire Department. Welcome to my firehouse kitchen. As you notice, my last name was Bonanno. It means I'm Italian, and one of the things we use in a lot of recipes up in the New York Fire Department is garlic. Now I'm going to show you a little different way that we used garlic, and one of the really great dishes that I used to make was a garlic mashed potatoes. You may think of garlic normally being used in a pasta sauce or something like that, but I used to use it in mashed potatoes, and it was a big hit in the New York City Fire Department. So I'm going to just show you a quick way to roast the garlic before you put it into your mashed potatoes. Now what you want to do is get yourself a good baking pan like this, ceramic, or actually you could use aluminum foil if you don't happen to have a baking pan like this. Now you just peel off some of that papery husk that you'll see on the outside of the garlic, like that. And then you take a really good sharp chef's knife and you cut off the top. And as you can see, you expose some of the tops of the garlic like that. And what you do is you place that in the center of the baking dish, and just a small amount of olive oil so that it doesn't stick on the top like that. Now you're going to take this garlic, put it into a 350 to 400 degree oven for between 35 and 45 minutes. And what it's going to come out like is it's going to come out cooked like this and spread apart, and you can see how dark it is. Now you're going to make yourself mashed potatoes. You make them normally the way you would make mashed potatoes, and when you start the mashing process, what you're going to do is you're going to take these garlic heads like that, and you give it take that end off, give it a squeeze, and you're going to squeeze out all of that brown cooked garlic. Now that gets all mashed up into the mashed potatoes, and I'm telling you, it really imparts a wonderful, wonderful, and also a healthy and low-fat way of really flavoring up your mashed potatoes. Okay, now that's a really great way to roast garlic that you can use in another dish like we used up in the New York City Fire Department. And as we say in the New York City Fire Department, it's time for me to take up. I'm Joseph Bonanno. Thank you. Good morning. I'm Joseph Bonanno of the New York City Fire Department, and welcome to my firehouse kitchen. Well, they say in good cooking, the secret is in the sauce. And that may be up in the Northeast where we have a nice cold winter, but down here in the South, the secret's in the salsa. And that salsa, I really like to prepare salsa in the summer recipes I used to make up in the New York Fire Department, because salsa is a really healthy and delicious way to kind of dress up a fish or a chicken type of a dish. The salsa that I'm using is from my Firehouse Grilling cookbook, and what we're going to use in it is a mango, which is, you can get locally here in Florida. And salsas are really easy to put together too. Now, what I used in this particular recipe here is a good hearty red onion, some chopped tomatoes. I prefer plum tomatoes, but you can use regular tomatoes too. The juice of 2 limes, very important in any salsa recipe, and really important in any delicious salsa recipe, is cilantro, fresh. Don't use dried in this particular dish. And a good mango, which you can get down here in Florida pretty easily. So what you want to do is you're going to do a rough chop of all of these ingredients, and what it kind of looks like here. Now what you're going to do is just a little bit of salt when you put all of these ingredients together, because salt will draw some of the water out of the tomato and some of the nice juice out of the mango. And it's really easy to put together, a rough chop, kind of give it a good mix, salt it, and then you want to let it sit for 30 minutes to let all these flavors meld and let the salt pull some of the nice juices out of this. And then at the end, add a little cilantro. And you can almost smell how delicious that would be over a nice fresh broiled or baked or grilled fish that you might catch here in the local waters of Florida. Now that's something I've used on quite a few recipes up in the New York City Fire Department to make some delicious meals that we've made. And as we say in the New York City Fire Department, it's time for me to take up. I'm Joseph Bonanno. Thank you. Good morning. I'm firefighter chef Joseph Bonanno of the New York City Fire Department. I'm here today to talk to you as a firefighter, not necessarily a chef. The U.S. Fire Administration says 90% of the fires start in the kitchen, and where they start is from an unattended stove. So I'm going to address some of the basic issues of fire safety here in the kitchen. One of the most important things before we talk about a fire extinguisher or oven mitts or all the standard stuff that you might want to have in your kitchen or a smoke alarm is what you see right here, and it might seem like the funniest thing to think about. It's a telephone. And the reason I stress this in some of my seminars and when I talk to people about fire safety is that this thing should be, if you smell any kind of smoke, you have any kind of incident in the kitchen at all, I want you to pick this phone up and you call 911, and we are on the way. If it winds up being something smaller than you think and you can handle it yourself with an extinguisher, fine, but at least we're on our way. That 2 to 3 minute delay that you may think it's something that you can handle yourself might cost you somebody's life in your house, or it might cost you your home, or one of your loved ones, which we'd hate to see. So I say call 911 no matter what kind of smoke you smell, no matter what kind of incident it is. We're not going to be mad at you. Don't worry about it if we show up and it turns out to be something minor. Now the kitchen is a place that produces heat. And you can have boiling water on a stove that could tip over and hurt somebody. You can have an unattended stove that could turn over and hurt somebody. So a kitchen is a place where, if you're going to have children involved, I love to see kids cook. I love to teach kids how to cook. But a kitchen is a place in particular where you want to keep a real special eye on kids. Now, if you do have an incident in the kitchen, every kitchen should have this, which is a Class ABC fire extinguisher, and 5 pounds. I'm often asked, well, maybe I should have a 25-pound one in there. Well, if you need a 25-pound fire extinguisher to put out your kitchen fire, that's too big of a fire. That's my job. And, I don't want to take my job away from you. So a 5-pound Class ABC fire extinguisher. Pulling pots and pans out of the oven, I've seen too many people injured. Get yourself a really good pair of oven mitts. And that's kind of the basics of fire safety. There's more to it than that. But these are the basics. And as we say in the New York City Fire Department, it's time for me to take up. I'm Joseph Bonanno. Thank you very much.